Hey there, you are live.
I am.
Do you have a video camera on? No. Okay.
Yeah, I just turned it off there. We're
Okay.
good.
I had a little trouble last show with recording this way, but I want to try again and find out if it was just a fluke. I didn't have any issues with Brian Forster, um, so let's just try it again. Record straight from Skype and see how we go from there. I have been off on a tangent the past hour and a half, a Brian Forster tangent,
Oh.
and looking at elongated skulls. And I tell you what, I don't think the Meyer information says anything but cradle boarding where that's concerned, but I wonder if it's possible that they could be withholding a little information there. I know sometimes they do that
Mm-hmm.
for safety for Billy's purposes, but
All right.
because I wonder, because some of these skulls are as big as their torsos. And the elongated skull also has, it only has one suture, where our skulls have three sutures, and it has to be that way
Mm-hmm.
for them for a child to be born, to come through the birth canal. The interesting thing is, some people speculate that the hips of these other humanoids had to be larger to handle this larger skull. And in this particular film, Brian shows fetuses with the elongated skull. So before they could have been cradle boarded.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. Yeah, he has gotten some DNA testing done, and some of the DNA testing has never been seen before in Homo sapien, Neanderthal,
Yeah.
one other early hominid, and any animal on Earth. They haven't seen this before.
Right.
So it makes you wonder.
It sure does. I did pay attention to that stuff as it was kind of coming out last year, and he was starting to pay more attention to that on his YouTube channel there, because I've been watching that for a couple of years, or a few years now, just off and on. And sometimes I really get into it because he's got so many videos and so much content, and it's all beautiful stuff because you're just traveling basically in these gorgeous countries and get to see everything that, all these amazing stone sites and stuff. So yeah, it's certainly one thing that has caught my attention though is those skulls. Yeah, because they did. I guess they did some research, apparently, on some of that. So and yeah, it does seem to be pretty interesting for sure. I guess he was demonstrating on one video the differences between that and the human skulls, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's really cool.
Some of the very large skulls, they also noticed, would grow two very small holes at
Hmm.
the back of the skull.
Right,
And he was just speculating what that might have been for.
right, right.
It was
Yeah.
clearly not, a wound, but they would grow these very small holes at the back of the skull
Hmm.
for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the eye sockets were incredibly huge as well.
Well, yeah, the whole bone structure is much bigger. The jaws are much bigger.
Yeah.
The actual mass of it is like, I think it was a 25% more mass or something. Anyway, I forget all the exact numbers. I haven't looked at that really closely lately, but it's yeah, the numbers are really interesting. And there's how the head has plates, the top of the skull on
Hmm.
our head. I guess ours only has two or something, and theirs
Hmm.
has three, which is you can't. Yeah, it's not something that you find in any humans anywhere. So it is interesting, and I don't know if Meyer has actually published information regarding that specifically, but I mean,
Well,
maybe it's not that
I
important for the mission or whatever. But
exactly. It could, maybe it's not. There's probably a limit on what kind of controversial information he'll totally get into. Even with the moon landing,
hmm
it took a long time for that to actually come out.
yeah,
And
no kidding.
he held on to that information.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
Like,
and for good reason. I mean, you see what happens to Julian Assange and all these guys when they're publishing the information that they're publishing. So, it's not something that, for the mission at least, that, it just doesn't serve any purpose in that regard. And, people can figure things out for themselves if they need to or whatever too. And, but that's not always successful either, because, of course, there's a million conspiracy theorists out there who are totally off on these weird tangents that don't make any sense too. So, that's another reason why I decided I needed to do those calculations. And it's not always useful information that just because something is out there and maybe it happened in a certain way and whatever. I mean, for the real progression of our social development and so on this planet, I think there's certain things that maybe are more priority. Some things are less priority. And
I agree with you.
Yeah, I guess it's just a thing too. Like, yeah, I mean, they want to not be assassinated, so that's a big motive.
That's a good motive too. Yeah, I think that there were at the top level in Contact 201, it states that there were like 37 people at the very top that were involved in the hoax, and there have been people killed.
Yes.
To keep the moon landing thing. Now, the Meyer information, anyone who listens to this show later, the Meyer information says the first moon landing was a fake, but the other ones were real.
Right.
And that's a very controversial situation as well. Usually people are one way or another,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've seen interesting things on some of those whatever people's findings and things like that on other videos and things from other landings or whatever, and some of it does look a bit questionable to me, but whatever. I mean, if they need to, whatever. I don't know. It's the States and the Russians and all this stuff and all these arms races and all this garbage that there's a lot at stake for these crazy people that feel like they need to have the biggest weapons or the biggest this or the biggest that. So I don't know. It's I just don't see that it's all that important. I think there's, I mean, it is interesting, certainly. And I think, however, I mean, there's just so much to focus on, and the whole thing with the skulls, I mean, that's something that fascinated me for a long, long time, long before I found Meyer's information, because
really?
I remember seeing some really interesting pictures when I was younger, and I just thought, oh, that looks pretty interesting. So I didn't know, I certainly took it with a grain of salt. It's not something that you just buy into automatically, with this kind of thing. So, but it certainly was interesting, and I thought, well, okay, so, that's just something I put in the bag, for now, and then see where it goes later on, that kind of thing. So I guess Brian Forrester is doing a bit more work in this regard and trying to, see what they find. I don't know how, accurate that is or whatever, but, it's just it's just the way things go, and you just have to take things with a grain of salt, and that's kind of how I did with my calculations too, is just one probability at a time, and eventually it becomes such a high probability that something is accurate that it's becomes harder and harder to refute a certain thing, right?
So are you reading The Way to Live now?
I almost finished that book, actually.
Did you?
Yeah. But I'm actually a lot of the thoughts in that book are still finding their way in my mind and all this kind of stuff, and when I wake up late at night and I'm thinking about this and I get my journal out and I start writing, thoughts down, that a lot of it comes down to the whole ideas that I'm learning out of these books too, with regard to striving and so on. And
isn't that one of the greatest things you ever learned?
Awesome.
it literally helps your life be organized and happy, yeah. And I can't say enough about it. It's just so important to continually be striving. I mean, even taking the time to watch the Brian Forster videos, it took away a little bit from my striving. Which
Yeah.
I've been reading today and studying the Maya material and working outside, which I think it really needed to be outside. I'm fighting
Right.
the cold right now, but
Well,
it's so I cannot. It's really hard to put into words. But that principle, if you can live by that principle of striving, it your thoughts will be more neutral, positive. Suddenly things will get organized in your life.
yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it the other day, and I wrote a few thoughts down, and I just realized, a few things, and it's interesting the analogies that you can find with regard to striving, because there's a lot of people who don't strive at all for knowledge, for information. They just take what the news gives them, and that's it, and they just take it hook, line, and sinker, and don't think about it much. They just say, well, that's what is happening, and so I don't know. It's a really funny world that we live in, that people can actually just take something like that at face value, especially when there's so many corporate interests and so on, at stake when it comes to
You know,
these
I
media organizations.
I think that the one of the attitude changes I had was that I'm no longer working just to get something done.
Right.
I'm working for the sake of working, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
To kind of enjoy that, just to enjoy the process, to
Yeah.
go into a neutral state of mind, work, and what I do is I divide my day up into these little short chunks of time so I don't get too burnt out on any one thing that I'm working on.
Right.
At least that's the way I've been organizing my time lately.
Yeah.
And it's a different mindset. And the other thing I'm trying to get myself to do, which I did do a little bit today, is meditation,
Wonderful.
which I should be doing all the time, and I want to get back to it.
I know. I kind of got away from it the last week or so, and because I got sick there and so on, and I just was pretty much in bed, and I just and then after a while, you kind of got things to do, and you have to get those done, and you're just not really focused on this routine anymore, and it just I don't know. Yeah, it's so nice to get back into. I finally did some the other night, and I'm just like, man, oh man, if I'd only done this last week, but it's one of those things. I guess it's all comes in waves, right? And ebb and flow.
Meditation gives you a rest that you
It
can't get in sleep.
it's huge. It, it's awesome. Yeah.
Because, I talk in my sleep, and my wife tells me when I talk in my sleep. So I'm having a hell of a night sometimes in my sleep. Don't remember a damn thing. I wake up really tired.
Oh man.
So
Oh,
my escape sometimes is meditation. So it's good to start again.
isn't it wonderful? I started again with just doing the candle meditation, and I'm doing another one now that a friend of mine told me about. I guess he's part of he's got the Geisterslehre, the spirit teaching, which is another aspect of Figu,
Hmm.
and it's like a 22-year course or something. But
My goodness. You're kidding.
um, yeah,
22-year course?
something like that. Anyway, and
That's
but he was telling me about a meditation that I've been trying, and it's been really nice. And you just kind of repeat the word pentra, and I forget the
Petra.
exact translation of it, but it does have a very nice effect. Yeah, pentra, pentra.
There's a website, dict dot cc, I think it is, that you can just type that in, it'll translate that for you.
Oh, I think this is not in German. This is it's kind of like the peace meditation. Uh,
Oh, okay.
kind of one of those things.
Like a
So
Lyrian type word or something?
I think so. Yeah. And so he gave me the German translation of it, and then and my wife looked at it, and I kind of looked at it, and I was kind of thinking, okay. So I kind of have a general feeling of what it might mean and so on, but it has a very very nice effect, and so I've been doing that. You just do it for 20 minutes at a time, I guess, and I don't know. It's just another thing that I add to my meditation. And have you ever looked at the meditation from Clear Sight meditations, like the
Uh,
seven
yes,
meditation?
exactly. But just on your point of this mantra that you're saying,
Oh,
Billy does talk about mantras being useful. And
yeah.
he talks about that in the Way to Live book, too.
Okay.
So I don't know what pentra means, but I guess I could use it as my mantra. It'd be nice to know what it means, though.
Yeah, I'll have to. I should dig that up sometime, and I can share it next time I have it.
Okay.
And well, yeah, it's kind of like those 77 phrases that they put together, that Billy or whoever it was put together. I've been using those, and it's just so wonderful. It's just awesome. I should dig them out here and read a couple, just because they're just it gets you thinking about this and that. Sorry, I just had to grab it across the room here.
I
And
I have well, one thing I wanted to throw out about meditation real quick is that not only does it free you of thoughts, but also emotions and feelings. And that's one of the things I never really realized. The other thing is, as far as that Meditation from Clear Visibility book, I have two that I've memorized. And
yeah,
the one is everything is achievable for me, and I master whatever I wish to accomplish. And the
yes,
other one is I always remain relaxed and thereby gain power over myself.
that's actually that second one is one I've been going over this week. Funnily enough, and I'd never noticed that one until this last week. So that's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
And there are still cases where, anxiety can creep in, and these kind of things are very good to, to help deal with that.
Yeah, well, it's great. I was showing this to a friend of mine in Switzerland, who's not really affiliated with Figure or anything, but I was just showing these meditations to him and his girlfriend, and he actually came and picked me up at the center, so he was obviously kind of curious what was going on and so on. He didn't know about it, even though his dad lived like 2 minutes away from there, which is really weird. But I met him in Canada, and it's just the way things work, right? So. And but yeah, I showed him these meditations, and they were like, yeah, it's actually quite impressive because most of these kinds of mantras are just so cheesy and so useless, and it's like, oh, just be positive, and everything will come to you, and it's just like, well, no, it's not exactly the way it works. Like you have to. There's a bit more to it than that, and they were very impressed with these meditations, and like the first one, like I really like it too. Is to live in today's world, I must be strong and develop tenacity with regard to my consciousness and my intellect. I mean, yeah, that's useful information. The more tranquil and tenacious I become, the more I cope with difficulties. I mean, it's all about acknowledging that there are difficulties, and to be able to to be able to really see them neutrally. And I think that's
See,
huge.
I would have never put together the two concepts of tenaciousness and tranquility.
Yeah,
That's I would have never thought of that. And
yeah,
never.
I know. It's interesting. I think because it is part of striving, right? Like the whole tenacious thing it is in a sense maybe a version of striving,
Oh,
and I think,
sure, sure.
and whenever I realize that I'm striving, like I'm actually focusing on scales, for example, when I'm practicing music. I mean, just doing scales really slow and methodical, and I'm just starting to get back into that now again. And it's just such a slow and stupid thing, and but it's wonderful because the results are huge in the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So otherwise, you're just kind of end up trying to find the notes, and you're fumbling through it, and that's what it sounds like. So number 70, I really like. Hard work matters to me and promotes my creative capabilities, as also my perseverance, the joy in working, and the will of goal achievement. I mean, that's one that I have to remind myself of regularly because I get a bit lazy too sometimes, right? So
The one thing about striving is that I think's important is if you can strive and stay neutral.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's the key there. Striving and being neutral, because if you're striving and you become negative or you become very positive,
Hmm.
you'll, I noticed that it seems to just, I fizzle out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because it's not balanced anymore.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, well, I like a certain analogy, and it just keeps coming back year after year after year for me. And it's something that I found, and actually Meyer does talk about it in The Might of Thoughts, interestingly enough, too. And it's the whole analogy with, somebody who's sailing through a storm, and a person who is striving, who is taking hold of the rudder, who is setting the sails to the wind, and who is maneuvering the waves and getting through until he finds a safe port, a safe port from the storm, a safe haven. Getting through the storm, I think is a great analogy because, so many people are living without that awareness, and they're so completely just they're not their hands are not on the steering wheel. They're just blowing through the storms. The waves are crashing their ship around, and then they just flounder. And then it's just they I guess they kind of give up because they think life is too hard. And in that respect, I would agree. It wouldn't work, if you just let things happen. And yeah, this whole storm analogy of sailing through a storm is such a great analogy, I think, for this kind of thing.
When you're striving, I think that's the key is um, make it so it doesn't seem like hard work.
Yeah.
And when I have the right frame of mind, it doesn't seem like hard work at all. And I go for a long, long time. I can go all day. Um, but if I if I focus on, oh, I just want to get this done, I want to get this over with, then it'll start to seem miserable.
Yeah. Exactly.
Instead of just, this is my process, this is what I do, and just take your little chunk of time, whatever, a little bit of time you want to associate with this task, and then go do something that maybe is different.
Hmm.
That's the way I organize my time anyway. I wanted to read something from the Way to Live book. It says, that which the human being really possesses is that which is in the moment, that of the present, the here and the now, which lasts less than a nanosecond. And a nanosecond is 1/1000th of a second. I can't even imagine a unit of time that's really that small. So that's what we really possess, is just the present.
Right.
That's all. So I'm trying to understand that. Um, Another interesting passage along that line says, just as the neurons in the human brain decay, also the cells of the entire body die. Nothing is constant, just as it is with the cloud formations in the sky, which constantly change and never create the same picture of the exact information, of the same formation. He must just sit and I just don't know how this much information came out of one guy. He must be writing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny when you try and talk to him. He's always seems preoccupied in his mind.
Does he?
Yeah, yeah. It's most of the time. I mean, I've had conversations with him where he's present, in the conversation and stuff too, and enjoyable moments and things. But it's sometimes when I've tried to talk to him, and other people have experienced this as well, he does seem preoccupied, and it's not surprising. I mean,
It's almost like he's somewhere else mentally.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, one time I talked to him and he didn't even respond. He just walked out of the room.
Didn't he really?
Yeah.
Probably just had a thought that he couldn't let go, and he just
Yeah,
he
exactly.
just walked out, and you're like, well, I won't take that personally.
No, you can't. I know how hard the guy is really working. I mean, look at the material he's published and everything. I mean, it's huge. So, yeah, and I mean, no, you can't take that personally. I mean, and so after that, I came back the next summer and we had pleasant conversations and things too. So I mean, it's
So,
there's no hard feelings there.
you know enough German to hold a decent conversation?
Um, I know enough to get by, especially on the important things, and like everyday things and so on. And I'm learning as I go too. I'm always working on it now when I'm working at my job, and I can just put it on my headphones and just listen to the German program that I'm working through and so on.
Oh, now, do you recommend a specific one, or?
I've been using Rosetta Stone. I actually think it's really good. I know people say that it's like it's better maybe just to start translating the information because you don't get all the major words and stuff that they're using in the spirit teaching. But as far as actually like everyday German speaking to people and that sort of thing, I think it's a great way to start. Personally, I was never very good in school, so that's kind of my downfall. And in a school setting, I just don't function very well at all. But the Rosetta Stone, I learned 10 words in my first half hour of using it, and I really learned them. Like I did not forget anything that I learned in that little period of time.
Wow.
And so it's a really, really, really great hands-on kind of tool because you learn to speak it properly too, which is really nice, and it plays it back to you through the computer. So you're talking through the microphone basically into the computer, and it tells you if you're right or wrong, and there's multiple choice, and it's all through.
There's voice recognition.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It's great. It's worth the money. I mean, I don't think I would have learned as much as I have with a $500 course at the college. So, and you get to learn, basic grammar and things like that too. And I'm only halfway through the course. So, but I kind of looked, a couple chapters later just to see what it would be like, and I didn't understand anything. So that's a good sign. It means there's a lot left to learn in this program. So that's a good thing. So I'm very excited.
I have along the lines of German, I have a strange fascination with the Luftwaffe. I can watch those old movies about the planes they developed during that time, and just all the time. I just love watching that stuff.
I have no idea what that is, but I've heard the word before.
Oh, the Luftwaffe?
Yeah.
That's what the Germans called their air force, the air weapon.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and they had a fully functional jet fighter plane back in 1944.
Yeah.
But Hitler didn't see the big value of it, so he wouldn't let him build enough.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they would have won the war if they would have just built enough of those things. It went 540 miles an hour. The Me-262 had 4 30-millimeter cannons on the front. There was nothing that we had that could deal with that. The only way we could shoot it down is when it was landing or taking off.
Oh, wow.
So, that whole World War II thing is very, very interesting because, Billy was growing up at that time.
Right.
And he saw things. I mean, he saw the American bombers flying over and being sometimes shot down by the Swiss Air Force, and there was also at that time the Giza intelligence, who were interacting with Hitler through that fellow named I think it's Hermann Steinschneider.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that from the contact notes.
Is that through the Thule Society and all that stuff?
Yes. Hitler, in the beginning, was not a crazy person at all. He was pushed to the dark side by these, Giza intelligence folks through this Hermann Steinschneider. So originally, the play on impulse to him when he was young. They thought his true destiny was to be a great leader on the earth.
Right. He had an unusually sized brain, I guess, is what the thing is. But his spiritual evolution wasn't as high. So yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting, though. Anyway, that whole the German thing, yeah. I've let that go a little bit. I need to get back on that.
Well, I was reading about the Foo Fighters actually recently, and Patah's remarks on on their not it wasn't really a Nazi UFO thing. It was actually some Nazi group members or whatever you want to call them who were part of this project. And I guess I think it started before the war, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so I found that really interesting, and I guess it had nothing to do with obviously Hitler's politics in the beginning, and it was more just to make an effort towards bringing worldwide peace. But then obviously that backfired when Hitler's mind was sort of turned
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
for the worse, and so through the B'ath and so forth. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing because anyway, and then yeah, I guess they all disappeared off to Argentina, and there was about 3,000 of them I think at the time, and by the time of this contact, which I think was in the 80s, there was only about 300 or 200 left or something, and I don't imagine that any of them are alive anymore. But they wouldn't bring in new group members to their to their clique to their
That's
group.
right. I think I remembered reading that.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
wouldn't they do that? They just didn't think anyone was worthy, or
I guess they were just afraid that maybe they
if
would lose control, or I'm not sure. But
what's interesting, you brought up Ptah because in Contact Report 115, and this relates to kind of some of the stuff I was talking about, or I wanted to get into this a little bit more with the Way to Live book. It says Ptah talks about a we form, and at that point he was married to 3 women at one time, and I think 2 of them ended up dying. So this is what he called a minimum value of a we form partnership,
hmm,
which I thought was really interesting. Now, the reason I got off onto the we form thing, it's something I'm interested in, first of all. But in on page 260 in The Way to Live, it says the human beings are like waves of the ocean. And it says human beings are like waves of the ocean. As far as they reach, they are connected with each other through the mass of the water. And as it is with the life of the human being, a wave has a beginning and an end, a becoming and a passing, a birth and a death. But we're all connected to, all the waves are just part of the ocean, and all human, I guess our subconsciousness is connected
hmm,
via this we form.
yeah.
The other we form that's talked about in Contact 228, which I think is really interesting, it says, consequently, there are in every we form, either material or spiritual, lower or lowest, respectively, higher or highest evolutionary stages. So I guess the human spirits at the Arahata level are a we form.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Wow.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting how people connect, isn't it? In really weird ways. I find sometimes when I'm just thinking of someone, and then half an hour I meet them in town just by mistake or whatever. It seems to happen to me a lot.
Really?
Really a lot. It's very interesting how that works. And over the years, I've noticed it more and more and more and more. And, people whose schedules I don't know, who I don't know what their work schedule is or anything like that. We just sometimes get together once in a while or whatever, and if I have to have a conversation with somebody, even somebody it might be an unpleasant conversation, then, you know, even if I go to town to get a haircut for 20 minutes, I'll meet that person on the street. It's just the weirdest thing how that
The,
works.
the person you don't necessarily want to talk to.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a
it,
necessary thing, and
and you were just thinking about it, right?
yeah, well, it's funny, because when I'm even with pleasant conversations and people who I just want to, reconnect with or whatever it might be too, it's neutral in that sense. I mean, there's no um, good or bad in that respect, but I mean, it works either way. And so there's, sometimes I meet this person with her little daughter, and at the same place at the same store, and totally different days of the week, totally different time of evening, and so on and so forth. And it's just, what the heck? What is that?
What are
And
the chances of that occurring randomly?
exactly. And people who I would like to avoid most of the time, when it concerns, somebody who, I don't really need to have any conversations with, or, there's no real need for me to connect with that person at the moment or whatever, then I can go on for years without meeting them, and then just all of a sudden when I'm thinking of somebody in particular, all of a sudden I'll go to town in an hour or in half an hour and 15 minutes, and all of a sudden there's that person, we say hi, and it's just the weirdest thing. It happens an awful lot, like it's a lot.
Don't you wish that you really could um, tap into the power of your subconscious?
Well, it's a nice thing to try and practice. I do give myself some sort of mental commands once in a while just to see how, but it has to be meaningful for my life. I can't just randomly do it. But if it's meaningful for my life, if I want to break off contact with certain people or whatever it might be for whatever reasons, because there's too many tensions arising because of our, differences or whatever, and so on, then for the most part, I will manage subconsciously just to avoid that situation. And on the same day I could be thinking about somebody who I really want to meet and I haven't met for months, or half a year or whatever it might be, and then all of a sudden there they are. It's just, it happens a lot, like many times a year, that kind of thing. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I've had a few situations here within the past 4 months or so that were along those lines. Like, my one dog recently died, and I remember before he died, 3 or 4 weeks before he died, I took him up to get his second ACL surgery. And I can remember driving up there. It was still dark. It was first thing in the morning, and I was going to drop him off. And then I work pretty close to the animal hospital there, and I was thinking, what if something happens to him? And this is the last time I ever see him. And he did fine after the surgery, but weeks later he did pass away. There was a little black cat I really, really liked. I was trying to adopt him slowly because my neighbors, they weren't taking good care of him. Long story, but and of course my wife doesn't want a seventh cat, which is understandable, and the other cats, recognize him as an intruder. So I'm feeding him and stuff. And I remember one time he came up, and this was this summer, or in the fall, I think it was, at the end of the summer, and all of my cats were out, all 6 of them. And he comes up, and he's like, he's just he was a great cat, and all the other cats are making that sound that cats make when they like, and I don't know. They wanted to. I thought I was going to see a big cat fight break out. But so I had some cheese in my pocket, so I kind of walked the little cat down the hill, and I gave him a couple pieces of cheeses, and then he would roll around in the grass, like cats do when they say thank you or they want to be your friend. And I kind of walked him down the yard. I have a pretty big hill I live on, because I didn't want to see a cat fight or whatever. But and I had this thought. I go, what if this is the last time I ever see him? And I don't know why I thought that. And I think I did see him just quickly 1 or 2 times after that, but he was killed 3 weeks later up on the road up here. Yeah. And I grabbed him and buried him. But it's just a shame. I think of the Earth as the planet of unnecessary death.
Yeah, it so is.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, there are so many deaths that I think could be prevented if we just knew what we were doing a little better.
Yeah, if we just took interest in our navigation. That's the thing. It comes whole back to the whole navigating the storm.
Oh, I see.
If you don't want to take an interest in how to read a compass or how to read the stars or how to read, the waves or the weather and how to make a knot and how to set your sails properly so they don't, destroy your ship or whatever it might be, you got to learn things.
Now, that analogy is that in the Way to Live book on a specific page?
I don't know if it goes into that much detail, but
Is it in this book?
it is in the Might of Thoughts, I think somewhere. It does mention sailing, like just navigating the waves and so on. And
In the Might of Thoughts or in the Way to Live?
in the Might of Thoughts.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I read that last year somewhere, but I'd heard that analogy in other places too, and but I just thought about it more and more and more. And while I was writing in my journal, some other ideas came up in terms of actually what do you have to learn to navigate the storm. I mean, we are living in a storm. There's no question about that in our civilization today.
Ah.
And if people don't take an interest and they give up or they say, well, it's not my responsibility or all that kind of stuff, then guess what? The storm is going to swamp your ship and you're going to be sitting there complaining. And if you hadn't complained in the first place, instead of maybe just getting on with your work, your duty, and learn how to navigate the storm, maybe you could have saved a bit of grief there. So it's kind of like looking in the fridge. You're hungry and all you see is ingredients, and you're like, oh man, I gotta cook some food. But on the other hand, try eating crappy food for a while and see how that helps you. So it's there's the whole thing with striving. Like it really is. The more you strive to make improvements, it really is a conscious choice. And the more we try to evade that choice, that is a choice still. And what you're kind of left with is chaos in the end. And so,
Well, speaking of chaos, I wonder if that's what we're headed into.
well, life is a giant physics lesson, right? So if we're neglecting certain responsibilities in our world and the way our social structures are working and the way we treat the environment and the way that we do anything in what we do, if we just feed ourselves garbage and don't exercise or all this kind of stuff, guess what? Yeah, of course we're headed that way. And nobody seems to really, want to change that.
Right now, we've got this winter storm Jupiter coming through. Have you heard about this?
No.
It's like all over the United States. It's just a gigantic ice storm that covers like 1,000 miles or something. It's crazy.
Wow.
And I've been putting salt down, and we're getting ice forming on the sidewalks and stuff. But it'll probably hit hard Monday or Tuesday is what I'm thinking. Right when.
Well, I wish we had tons of snow here. That would be fantastic. I would love it. But we're ready for it here, so we're prepared for that sort of thing.
You're way up north.
Yeah, so
The other thing that's just beyond belief right now, I don't know if you've been paying any attention to the insane political situation in the United States, but what is going on in the mainstream media, CNN, ABC, NBC, all these, they are putting out pure 100% propaganda now. I've never seen anything like it. They're trying to start a war with Russia. They're trying to blame the Trump winning the election on Russian hacking on our...
Just totally unsubstantiated.
Completely absurd stuff. I mean, most computers are not even connected on the internet that you do a vote on. It's just crazy. And I won't get into it all, but it's just so blatantly absurd.
Oh, I know.
I've had to ignore it. It's so bad.
You pretty much have to. I mean, it's unfortunate. It is part of riding the storm, and you kind of have to be aware of it, which is crappy because, it would be so nice if we could just get on with, doing real things in our lives instead of dealing with these manufactured crap problems that, these idiots, these total idiots, these power greedy morons are so hell-bent on trying to, put on everyone. And, Russia and Putin have been very clear. If NATO steps into Russian borders, they're going to be lobbing nukes into EU and to the U.S.
Yeah.
They made that very clear. They're not mincing their words even a little bit. So for the American media to completely ignore that, what the hell are they thinking?
Well, I think that there's a group of people that in the United States think that they want war with Russia.
Yeah, they might think that, but that's
Yeah.
that's the word "think" quite wrongly.
So, yeah, I don't know. The good news is we haven't had the Civil War yet that Billy's predicting.
Oh, yeah, that might be brewing. I think since the Trump election, it's amazing actually how many people I talk to are completely unaware of what WikiLeaks is.
Oh,
They have no idea what it does, what it is, how it works.
seriously.
Yeah, very seriously. And I'm wondering, because these people are so, still so supportive of Clinton and stuff, and I'm just thinking,
It's
I'm not pro-Trump, and I'm not pro. I was a Bernie Sanders guy. I'm not even American, right? So, but I would have been way more for Bernie Sanders than either of these people. But between the two, I guess Trump still wins because he doesn't want the war with Russia. So
exactly. He doesn't want nuclear war. Come on.
yeah. So
Um,
if you guys have your civil war and contain the destruction to your own country, great.
yeah, I tell you, I hope Billy's wrong about the Civil War thing. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a prediction thing now. It's not a prophecy now. So
Is it a prediction? Is he saying?
yeah, that's the understanding I have from watching his video. Michael Horn asked him that, and
Really? I
that
missed
was
that. I'll have to listen to that again.
yeah. I was unsure for a while, and I looked at it again last week, and that seems to be the message. So um, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I miscalculated that, but that was my understanding
Hmm.
of video. So that was the Michael Horn interview of Billy from 2015, I think it was, or
You
something.
know what's
16.
interesting? What's very interesting is Billy's spirit form is 9.6 billion years old. His material consciousness is almost 80 years old. Now, can you imagine I mean, he obviously made mistakes when he was growing up and things and misunderstood things and maybe gotten involved in some things he shouldn't have, as he was growing up.
Hmm.
But he's just got this gigantic spiritual consciousness there, 9.6 billion years old, just
Yeah.
impulsing him with information. So there is a real discrepancy there in that his personality, his conscious mind has to grow up just like everybody else, and he's going to make some errors. But it's astonishing now because I really think about this whole universal prophet thing and think this is the same guy that lived lives as Aristotle, Socrates, Mendelssohn, Mozart, and I wonder why he did live lives as a musician. And it kind of dawned on me because music has a very unusual power of making the spiritual side of things 100% real, almost palpable and physical
Hmm.
to people that are not spiritually oriented.
It does.
Isn't that interesting that it can do that?
Well, when you were bringing up that point earlier about focusing on the moment, how the nanosecond, is the only moment you have, that's something that you have to find out when you're a musician.
Yes.
You have to live in the moment because you can't just press play and it plays it for you. You're there in the moment, you're living in the moment, and that's something that you cannot lose your awareness of as a musician.
If you do, you're going to make a mistake.
That's right.
It's almost guaranteed.
Exactly.
If your mind starts to wander or think, and that's another interesting thing, it's almost like meditation because you have to turn your mind off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really funny. I have this M-Wave. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like a little device that it sort of measures your heartbeats, but in a way, like that video game that they made. I don't know. Sorry, I don't even remember what it's called, but it's a video game that uses the same technology, and it kind of measures how relaxed you are
Oh.
through your heartbeats. Not the heart rate, but it measures like the distance between the heartbeats and stuff like that, if it's consistent, and so on and so forth. So it measures that, and it works really well. It's very effective for if you are starting to meditate and you don't know if you're doing it right, or you think that it tells you right away if you have any anxiety, basically.
Really?
It's great. It is so good. And this video game basically works on this principle. You have this device that you use, and to do things in a video game, you actually have to change your state of mind. And so that's really cool. And but actually, I did put the earpiece on this little device once, and I turned it on, and I was practicing my music, and I was practicing like hardcore Cuban music, like I was Santana, that not that he doesn't play Cuban, but I mean like doing that kind of a rock thing over top of the Cuban stuff with my saxophone, and that thing was on green the whole time, like it was right on. Like I was in a meditative state, even though I was playing really hardcore music. And in some cases, even when I'm sitting, in a room trying to meditate, I don't get that relaxed. And it's very interesting how that works. It's more about coherence, the coherence of your
Your thinking. Let me pause this just for a second. All right, I'm back.
Oh, welcome back.
So this will put you in a you're saying that playing your music is literally slowing your heart rate down and you're in a meditative state?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm doing music that is, very, if I'm really in a zone where I'm actually present.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. I know.
So even if I'm practicing scales very slowly and that kind of thing, and doing methodical, very, very slow, patient, and so on. Even if I'm doing that, it's still the same thing. But when I'm doing, the hardcore, woohoo, fun, having a great party with my sax, and that sort of thing, saxophone, it's still the same thing if I'm doing it, in a way that is coherent and so on. If I don't know what I'm doing, then obviously that raises the anxiety and so on. But so, but yeah, it's really interesting.
Music has so many. It has such a strangeness to us. The other thing that I find very interesting is when I'm in that state of mind that you're talking about, I have an enhanced intuition, and I can do things that I have to go back and teach myself later. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
Yes.
Like you can just write something on the spot, it'll be perfect, and you have to come back later and say, okay, what was I doing? How did I do this? How did I do that?
Exactly. Yeah. Have I ever? Yeah, I do that regularly.
So you're almost in a higher state of awareness.
Yeah, and that's the thing to try and tap into, and that's the one thing I've always tried to tap into in the music thing. And I find a lot of musicians kind of miss that boat because they're not aware of these different facets of the mind. And that's kind of something that I've noticed early on in my career, even as a young boy growing up. And I thought that this was such a huge advantage, because you're learning through meditation and stuff how to be present. And when you're present, that is the whole thing. If you're not present, you're not present. You're somewhere else. You're not where you are, and you're not dealing with what's in front of you. So it's very interesting.
Do you always do the candle meditation, or do you ever meditate with your eyes closed?
Well, the Pentra thing, I guess, is with eyes closed.
Okay. Pentra, and you got to send me a message on what that means. I want to.
Yeah, I'll do that.
But it's a Lyrian word. It's Illyrian.
I think it is. Yeah. So, I do it for 20 minutes, and then each day, I guess, and with your eyes closed. Yeah. Candle meditation is with your eyes open. Yeah. And I'm kind of at the point now where I had started doing it over again, like from scratch.
Mm.
a while ago, and now I'm sort of at the no thoughts stage again. And
Good, good.
yeah, coming up to the golden rose or red or golden rose or whatever aspect of it in a couple days again. So sometimes I just have to start over again like that, and at the end of it, I guess there's the wishful dream aspect of it, where you do for 15 minutes. Just
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. You know, I had forgot that he actually has written it down that way. Sometimes I just do that because it felt like the right thing to do.
yeah, yeah. I think there's something to be said for that too. I really like just repeating the word "sun," with the first part of it. Actually, I really enjoy that. So. But I realized when I was in my sound room here, I had the candle on, and I kept falling asleep for some reason. And I realized obviously the carbon dioxide was building up in there. I was like, oh crap! So
I'm gonna kill myself, right?
yeah, yeah, right, or something like that. I would just keep falling asleep. It wasn't very effective meditation at all. So
Well, I think, at least with me, sometimes I get into a state between sleep and almost just one little step above sleep, and it's
right.
the most restful thing in the world.
Oh yeah,
So,
they do mention that actually in their booklet on meditation.
do
The
do that.
Canadian Figure Group, they published just a little booklet on meditation, and they mentioned that actually sleep, when you're feeling very tired after meditation and need to sleep, it's actually a very good sign. That
I would, yeah.
yeah, although in my case it was because of the carbon dioxide, so it's not really a good sign. So I kind of figured that out because none of my meditations were working out as they usually do, so it's kind of a different thing. But
I've got to get Michael Utebrock back on the show.
you've had him on the show before?
A couple times. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I haven't called him in a while to try to get in touch with him. I haven't sent him any emails.
Hmm.
I really like talking to him. He's really so dedicated. I just admire his dedication.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I get the feeling from him and his wife, Catherine. Um, yeah, because they're both, I guess, head of the, or I don't know, they're sort of the main organizers of the Canadian Figu group, right? So
Are you what do they call it? A partial member, Pigo, whatever?
I'm a passive member. Yeah,
Passive member. Okay, yeah, yeah. I forgot the terminology.
yeah, yeah. I decided to get that finally, and yeah, no, it's nice just to go and visit at the center, and I just love my time there. So
You have to go once a year, right?
I guess they recommend that, and it's just such a nice thing to do. I mean, the people that you get to meet, the conversations you have, and just being there. I mean, I got to take those lovely pictures there while I was there this year, and that was fun. And but even before that experience, I was just beaming from ear to ear. It was just such a nice experience to be with the people there, and because I don't know, it's very difficult for me to connect with many people in the world, in my normal everyday life, and so it is really a breath of fresh air. And I guess there's something to be said about you know the whole codex thing that used to be. It is no longer, but I still grew up with a part of that, and I certainly felt its effects, unfortunately. Um, and fortunately, of course, too. I mean, there's neutral positive, and I certainly got a lot of good out of it, and obviously. But after 1995, I guess that's when they canceled that, or they don't need it anymore, and so on. So
Really?
yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, even when I was 7 years old, I knew the word codex, and nobody told me about Meyer case or anything. They were all Christians, and so on and so forth. And
So the Codex being that the Lyrians who had caused trouble here in the past would be reincarnating on the Earth to kind of undo some of the damage they did. Is that what you mean by Codex?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm glad we don't need that anymore because it was a bit forceful. Um, I don't know. It's not something I actually talk about, and I probably shouldn't talk about it publicly. But it is interesting, and maybe for some Figu people who've certainly experienced that sort of thing, and it certainly works through impulse. I mean, the impulses were I couldn't ignore them, and that's when I started doing my calculations, and then my calculations led me right to the door of the Meyer case. So, you know,
So
um,
you think you may have been part of that?
Oh yeah, I am pretty sure I was, and I think most of us have been in one respect or another. I think there's quite a few of us who have been. So it's over 100,000, I think, isn't it? So of us, and anyway, so it's an interesting, weird thing that most people will not be able to relate to, and it's unfortunate because it is very annoying, and that's why I like going to the center because they can all relate to that, and it's the first time I ever felt sort of like I could just, express some of those thoughts because obviously most people, it's impossible to do that because, I don't know.
Well, won't some of the people that have even left the FIGU, I won't mention any names or whatever, won't they come back in other lives even?
Oh, probably, yeah. It's the material life, it's not, there's no guarantee that, he'll be part of this. I mean, many people who were even, part of the codex were maybe quite religiously brought up and they ignored those impulses and stuff too. So, I mean, there's something to be said about that. I just happened to notice it when I was really young, and so that kind of steered me away from, those religious impulses and things too. That it just makes, it just made things easier in terms of my own path, but that doesn't mean it's the same for everybody.
Now, when you say impulses, are you saying that you felt like you were kind of driven towards
Yeah,
this information?
totally. I mean, I didn't have a choice about it. In fact, when I was 9 years old, I was suicidal because of that, and
Because of the impulse?
yeah, because I couldn't shut it off. I realized I felt like I had no choice about being part of this, and I didn't understand it much at the time. Obviously, I just knew that there was a lot of religious ideas and things that needed to be neutralized on our world, and I wasn't interested in religion at all. I didn't have any interest in that or inclination towards those ideas, and I just saw that how much of that was really affecting our world and destroying our world, and I figured that this would be an ultimately hard lifetime to live through, based on some of the projections that I was noticing from just noticing our financial collapse that's upcoming, and all this kind of stuff, and the overpopulation that leads to the degradation of the environment, and starvation and diseases and all this kind of whatever social unrest, and so on and so forth. And just the mixture of that with the really barbaric ideas from the Bronze Age mythology and all this crap that we're still living with, even though we have nuclear bombs and things. I mean, it's what a combination.
I read
So
something somewhere today in the Way to Live that said the creation has nothing to do with punishment.
yeah, you kind of create your own punishments, I guess, through cause and effect, right?
So that I had to think about if there would be a hell, and if a universal creature was punishing people in a hell for all eternity, it seems like such a terrible waste of energy because there's
Hmm.
no good outcome from that. It's
Exactly.
it's not like they have a chance to learn and change their ways.
Exactly.
And
It's
it would be wasting an infinite amount of energy too, because it goes on forever, right?
yeah, exactly. And I mean, you get to so-called heaven, and what do? I mean, everything's provided for, and so on. So that's kind of boring.
That's interesting. I've never talked to anyone else that have had the same thought. I had that same thought before too.
Yeah.
Like, so what are we
Uh,
gonna do? It never says.
yeah, it's as Billy puts it, you just sit there smelling God's feet for eternity. I mean, that's not really.
That's funny. That's so funny.
But yeah, it doesn't promote any kind of motive, for doing good. I mean, people who are religious in one way or another were telling me that because even good people, if they didn't believe in their religion, they were going to hell, and bad people, if they believed in their religion, were going to heaven. And it's like, well, really, is that does that give you any motivation then to do any good? I mean, no, obviously not. So what's the point? I mean, either this doctrine is wrong or it's wrong. There's just no other answer, you know. So it just doesn't make any sense. And I think people just
Well,
need.
you know what we could do some days? We could get our Bibles out and do a whole study on it and
Oh, jeez. Every
discuss.
time I used to go to these youth group things, you know, because it was kind of a way to just meet young people at the time when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And they played games and stuff part of the time, but then they had these Bible studies, and I would just sit there making cracks, jokes, and all this kind of stuff, and they were actually giggling, they were laughing, but I could tell I wasn't really invited after that. So, but they could see the absurdity of it whenever I made jokes, and whatever, I just couldn't, I can't stomach it. It's just too difficult.
You know, it doesn't really bother me that way. There was a Jehovah Witness that came to the house this summer, and like one of them stayed in the van and one of them got out, and I could tell like she was the beginner, the newbie.
Oh,
So I sat down and talked to her, you know, because I used to study the Bible all the time, and like she was blown away, and she goes, "Well, let me go back and get one of the elders of the church, and I'll bring him back, and he can talk to you." So a week or two later, he brought one of the elders, and then I kind of blew him away too, and started talking about the Meyer stuff and a whole bunch of stuff, and I could tell he was actually really interested.
that's an interesting thing. Yeah, actually, a bishop stopped at our shop the other day, a retired bishop, and same reaction.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting how that works. Yeah.
Well, they've got questions.
Oh, for sure.
They got
And
things they don't have answers for,
no kidding.
and it's real easy to point them out.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's nice when they're open-minded and they're open to ideas and talking. It's the people that I grew up with. A lot of them were very rigid and didn't want to look at any evidence whatsoever. Like dinosaur bones were put there by the devil, that kind of thing.
yeah.
So that I can't stand. But, when you can actually have a conversation on the level and they let you talk as well, like it's not just about shutting you up and not letting them talk or letting them talk only or whatever, that's what it felt like when I was growing up. So, but when it's level conversation, when you're each talking to each other instead of down to each other, you get across to each other a lot better that way, I think.
And it can actually be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think, that's what it should be about. And I don't care if someone's, religious or not, or, this kind of stuff. I mean, as long as they're striving, as long as they're interested in learning and examining ideas.
And I think if you strive long enough, you'll eventually strive out of your religion.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was Isaac Asimov, the mathematician, that put it that way, right? He said, well, the best what's the word? I guess machine for creating atheists is the Bible.
That is hilarious. I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah. It's not exactly his words, but it's kind of in that respect. It's yeah.
And it's such an interesting thing because being able to differentiate the concept of a universal consciousness / the creation versus a God, and being able to define those differences, I think is real critical. And it's not easy.
It isn't.
Because we've been indoctrinated.
Exactly. Well, I was lucky in that way. I guess when my family ever talked about using the word quote unquote God, they did mean more the universal consciousness type of thing, and that sort of got me at least, I don't know, exploring a bit more. And if it was just, the typical version of, other people that I was growing up with who were only, there's a beardy man in the sky who has a laptop and he's going to press the delete button on you if you don't, all this kind of stuff. That wouldn't have worked for me, but, I could see the contrast, and that was important.
That's interesting. So, in other words, I think people can, if their mind is thinking in the right way, be in a religion and eventually step out of it and walk into these other concepts.
Yeah, if people allow themselves to explore ideas, when you get too locked into one thing, you're not allowed to explore new ideas. Like that's kind of the thing. I mean, when you talk to, like when I'm talking to you or whatever, you've read the Bible, you've gone into that, and you're not one of those people who says, oh, you shouldn't read that or you shouldn't read this or anything like that. No, you should read it all.
Mm-hmm.
You should read it all, and then you have at least an overview of what their ideas are, and then you can make up your own mind. That's the point.
What it made me think of is Brian Forster. And I was real surprised to hear that he works with that L.A. Marzulli guy. I guess I shouldn't be saying names, but I am.
You can edit it out later if you want.
I'll leave it in. What the hell? L.A. Marzulli is very religious.
Oh, okay.
So I guess from his perspective, all of these elongated skulls and all of the ancient sites, the Maya materials talked about,
right?
The Great Pyramid being 73,000 years old, and the people from Orion being here, and the Lyrians being here. But from what I've heard, is his point of view is all of that is the quote-unquote Nephilim, and they wrap all that information in a box, so it can't be understood. It can't be understood outside of their religious view.
Mm.
So, and that's one of my sticking points.
Yeah.
I don't like that, because that really can be stopping people from evolving completely.
Oh, totally. I mean, I when I say I watch Brian Forster's videos, I don't believe everything he says. I just find certain things interesting with regards to the engineering, in the rocks.
Well, I don't think Brian is religious at all.
Okay, that's
No,
yeah.
no.
I mean, I certainly haven't noticed any religion in his part. So.
No. Yeah, I don't think he is. I think he's very open-minded. I think he's willing to go wherever the data takes him.
Yeah, it seems more like it. He usually brings engineers and things with him to look at the stones and to, look at the saw marks and, what kind of stone is this? How hard is the stone? Could they have made this with copper chisels and all this kind of stuff? And usually the answer is no. They couldn't have. And when you're, up at 7 or 6 or 7 on the Mohs scale of hardness, then when you're down at 3, yeah, you could. But when you're up in the 6 or 7 levels, no, you can't. And then you need, at least diamond saws for cutting through these kinds of stone. And so this is not a secret anywhere. Anyone can find this out. And in some ways, that's to me, that's more interesting, because, you start putting things together. It's kind of like the way I did my calculations too. You're looking at these points that are really hard to refute, because, it's just the way that our technology is developed, and we know certain things, and we know certain things could not be possible, and certain things can be possible based on chemistry and things like that too, and we have to have at least an understanding up to our level to be able to do what these people have built around the world. So, and we can't even do it today.
We still can't do it.
Even our telescopes are not as accurate as the pyramids, and pyramids are huge by comparison to any of our telescopes. So it's
we're at a really weird state right now on the Earth. We're in a weird in-between state, and that's probably where we could like if we fall into a war or whatever. I mean, I'm hoping that's not going to happen. I still keep the positive attitude.
Yeah. I'm certainly keeping my fingers crossed on that one too. Of course, nobody would want to live through that. I mean, I just have to look at my grandpa, who was in the Second World War.
Was he?
And he was absolutely traumatized by it. And
where was he? Do you remember where he served?
I think he was in Britain, and he worked on the bombers. He didn't work in the bombers flying. I think he was a mechanic, but some of the things that he saw was just horrific.
People on the bombers that were horrifically wounded or killed, or
yeah, friends that he made that were killed, on and on.
Yeah,
and just seeing obviously a lot of places were bombed in the UK too, I think, right? So the wars were going both ways. So
The reason we won that war, assuming that you can say we won it, is just because we produced a lot more material. The industrial might.
right,
But the Germans had at least 10 guys with over 200 air kills.
right.
Our best
Yeah.
guy had 40.
Wow.
Look at the discrepancy there.
Yeah, that's
Now,
huge.
now we would cycle people out sooner, but they didn't have that luxury,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
Germans didn't have that luxury. And the same with the Japanese. They had at least one guy, Saburo Saki, I believe, had over 200 kills as well.
Jeez. Yeah.
So,
Well, it's an interesting statistic actually out there about people in war, when soldiers and so forth tend to have a very low, mostly tend to have a very low, like they don't even aim at people because they don't want to kill people. That kind of thing. And there seems to be a lot more of that than you would think. And of course, there are a lot of horrific things that obviously happen, and there's nothing, to hide that fact. But that is an interesting statistic. I don't know how true it is, but I would imagine, many people like my grandfather who were not warlike people at all. They were the most peace-loving people you could possibly meet. Didn't want to kill anyone, you know.
right.
These were civilians. These were not soldiers, And a lot of even veterans from Germany and veterans from, the Western countries and so forth would become friends after the war. That kind of thing too happened a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And so, because it's just what a horrific thing. I mean, it's just you're in these wars, and basically these wars are about rich people.
They are always.
The rich people are never in the wars. They're always, tucked away somewhere in the background, and then they're sending out everybody else, and everybody else is wondering in the end, what the hell are we killing each other for?
Exactly.
It always seems to come back to that. So I think, why? And I listen to a lot of John McDermott. He's a singer, and I think he's Scottish. And he sang many songs about the First World War and so on. And I listened to that growing up, and it's these poems, these stories, and you can never think about war in the same way after you're listening to that sort of thing, And beautiful music, beautiful voice, and these songs are so powerful because they really, really delve into the emotions that these soldiers have when they're in the war and the battles, and they're making friends, and they die, and they're making even friends sometimes with the enemy, and they kill each other after, and it's just this senseless brutality. It's so senseless and stupid. And that particular singer, my dad was really into him, and I would have to stay at the shop when I was a young little kid, and I would just be sitting there listening to that music because I couldn't work at the time, He'd just be babysitting me pretty much while he was working, and I'd be listening to this music and thinking about it and reflecting on the words and what does it mean, and wow. If you ever get the chance, listen to some of that music.
What's his name?
John McDermott.
Okay.
Don McDermott or John McDermott. I forget exactly, but it's been a while. But it's just so powerful. And, these stories really outline just the senselessness of it. It's just so stupid. It's just so pointless.
Well, I think, we have to take responsibility for being, quote unquote, order takers.
Yeah.
Exactly. And can you imagine if the people just disobeyed the orders, there'd be no war?
Yeah, no kidding. Exactly. So, I mean, what is this? How do people, yeah, sure, maybe they need to make a living, but my goodness.
Right.
I would never.
That's part of the issue is people, for whatever reason, they don't have a source of income, so they join the military.
Right.
And of course, it's not worth it, but at least they got an income then.
Jeez, yeah, yeah, and then what? There has to be better ways, and so I'm constantly thinking, about that too. I mean, I had something on my mind, and I forget what it was here. Anyway, it's along those lines, and I just think about it, and why? Yeah, just why? I mean, we could do so much better. if we just took responsibility for our thoughts, and I see these young people, they're, playing these stupid video games, whatever, the Pokemon Go or whatever, and that's totally helping the CIA and the NSA and so on, and that's a very well-known fact, and even they know this fact, and then they're like, oh, well, we didn't do anything wrong, and all this kind of stuff, and I just think, that's ignorance that's going to, come back to bite you one day, And,
How does that help the CIA?
well, they're taking pictures of all these locations, and they're constantly getting updated pictures of,
Oh, you mean through your camera on your laptop or whatever?
Well, it's this game on your phone, right? It's this Pokemon Go or whatever it's called.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people are taking these pictures of all these different locations, and some of them have been caught in military bases and all kinds of stuff and thrown in jail or whatever. And and it's purely for it's the same creator of Google and a few other people who are all connected to the CIA or the NSA, sorry. And it's just amazing, And this is just an intelligence gathering weapon. That's all it is.
I think the NSA, the CIA is a big problem.
Oh, it's a huge problem. Oh man. If it wasn't for that, I think we'd be a much better world.
Much better world, yes.
Huh,
if we could somehow figure out a way, I mean, Trump says he's going to drain the swamp, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I think it's a very dangerous world when it comes to draining the swamp.
Yeah, I think WikiLeaks is doing a good job on their own. But yeah, no, it's. I've been paying attention to WikiLeaks still, and I guess Assange has been doing some TV interviews again and stuff recently, so that's a good sign. And he's not dead, so.
He's not dead yet.
No, so yeah, and I think about Billy and these guys and all these sort of whistleblowers, but just the way that the contacts and FIGU and so on is structured is much more safe with its association with UFOs.
I think so.
It is, yeah. Because
I agree.
People have to work so much harder to find the credibility in it. And with WikiLeaks and so forth, it's much easier to understand where they're coming from and that it is a credible source. Whereas when you're looking at FIGU and the contacts and so forth, you have to do way more work to find that it is credible. And
by the way, I wanted to bring something up, and I forgot to do this. I think a lot of the original films of Billy's with the beam ships, I can't find them on the internet anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What you can get is a film of a film or something like that. But you used to be able to see the actual film, and crystal clear daylight beam ship right there, no doubt about it. Cars going underneath, amazing stuff, and even like real close up of the wedding cake ship. Right. We used to get all those, but I wonder if those have been stolen, or maybe they've put. I think that one of the goals they try to do is put so much crap out there that you can't find things anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to do your own diligence. I think that's the only thing. And I just got I just got Chris Locke and Raoul Zhao, his new book about the wedding cake UFO.
Oh, really? He wrote a book on it?
They wrote a book, and it's basically a practical guide for young scientists and how to determine scientifically, what you're looking at in these pictures. So, and it's fascinating. It's great. They did a fantastic job. So, and it's very easy to determine then, but they do have some links in that book from Raoul's page and so on about his webpage from the pictures, very high quality pictures and so on. But when you go to the Future of Mankind website, usually you can find those pictures, no?
You can find the pictures, but not the films.
Oh, the films, I see.
I cannot get the films anymore. At least I haven't been able to find them.
Oh, okay.
I can get films that are actually films of films.
Right.
And they're extremely grainy. They don't look anything like the original. I mean, they're nothing like that.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, at least that's what I found.
Interesting. I should look and see
You
what
know
that.
the wedding cake UFO, and I know we're going way over here. We'll have to hit the save button here soon, but the wedding cake UFO is a very strange device.
Yeah.
Um, that thing, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was one of, first of all, they stopped making it because of some of the pollutions and chemicals in our atmosphere did something to the metal on that ship.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember that? And so they had to stop making it. But that was the first one of the first ships where they could literally like travel from their star system, boom, to here. Like,
Oh, okay.
they used to have to do the jump and then come back into physical reality sometimes, near the edge of our solar system and then move
Right.
slowly. But there was some technological breakthrough there
Okay.
where they could literally, so, and I remember looking at that when I was young, going, it's hard to describe the feeling you get when your intuition says, oh shit, that's real.
Yeah, it's a weird ship.
I know.
It's one of the most controversial ones, but it ended up also being one of the most useful ones for this analysis. And that's the interesting thing because with the reflections on the balls, right?
Yes.
You can see the reflection of the carriage house where behind Meyer when he was taking the pictures on these balls. So the ship is in front of him, the carriage house is behind him. You can see the reflection on each ball. And the reflection will tell you exactly what size that ship is because it doesn't matter what size the ball is. The reflection, the amount that the carriage house takes up in each reflection on these balls will tell you how far away from the camera the
Right.
object is.
If it was a little tiny little model, Billy was standing close to it, his shadow would go right over it.
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But the carriage house reflection would take up most of the ball in that
It would
case.
take up, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
You can, yeah, I remember him describing that to me.
mhm,
And
yeah.
it becomes very, very obvious.
hmm And so now kids can replicate these experiments at home with Google Earth. They can build themselves a little model of the property, and then they can a scale model, and then they can build like a scale model of the wall, and so on, and then they can figure out what meters are based on their model that they built of the property. And then they can take a little reflective object, like maybe a tiny Christmas ball, Christmas tree ball, or whatever, something that's reflective, and then they can just go back and forth, back steadily, 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, and see how big the reflection is in that ball from the carriage house.
Hmm.
And from that, you can determine the size of it. So that's not rocket science. Any teenager would be able to do this, to replicate this and understand it. So it's very interesting. It's not like I don't know what his name is. That guy who built Phil Langdon or whatever, who built a model, a small model of the ship, and then he said, "Oh well, look, anybody can build a model of this, blah blah blah." Well, sure, anybody can build a model of an airplane or of a car, but it doesn't prove that they don't exist. It's just you have to be a bit more scientific than that. So
Well, a lot of these folks, they don't want to acknowledge the reality of the case.
yeah.
And I just let them go.
Well, exactly. You have to. So. So I'm just outlining the difference, though, between the analysis, and so it's really interesting. It's a good book. I flipped through it, and yeah, it's wonderful what they've done because this is something that's kids would be able to do in their home in an afternoon.
I think that's a very impressive. It's another way to prove the validity.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
For me, it's
And,
always been the content of the information.
mm-hmm.
So I would learn a little bit more, and then I'd have to go back and say, "Wow, this just seems really real." And then
Yeah,
I have to go learn a little more.
right. Well, that's the weird thing I like about this case is with this particular ship, for example, the wedding cake UFO. It just looks so weird. It looks so
So bizarre.
yeah, and at the same time, it's one of the most effective ones for actually finding, out how big it is, and all these different aspects about it, these different qualities about it, because of these shapes, these balls that are all over the place, reflecting this and that and so on the ship. And so it's kind of interesting. I actually mentioned that in my calculations too, that they would have to design this evidence in a way that makes it possible for people to have an out if they can't process this kind of thing.
Well, that's the key. I'm glad you said the word process, because I really think in the Meyer case, particularly in the beginning, that I was right at the limit of my processing on more than one occasion. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did have some questions that came up and this and that, and I remember you mentioning the thing with reincarnation, and that wasn't as much of a surprise for me, but other things certainly were. And I think it's just, the way that they designed this evidence, this physical evidence, is, Photoshop looks a lot more impressive to our eye today, especially to a young person or anybody, than it does with film photography. Film photography looks grainy. It kind of looks fake. No matter what it is, it doesn't look as clear. It doesn't look as good. But there's so much more you can tell as a scientist based on film photography than you can with digital photography. So there's all these kind of little loops in all the way that people process it, and it's really designed for everybody. And if somebody can't handle the subject of UFOs because of their religious beliefs or whatever it might be, then it's okay, and they can safely in their minds block it out of their minds for a while, and
Yes, for a while.
Yeah. And
maybe this whole lifetime, but eventually.
Exactly.
We'll get you next lifetime or the one after that.
Exactly.
And that's why I never try to push anything on anybody anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot easier not to, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's good if you just recognize that they're just not ready yet. They will be.
Yeah, exactly.
Eventually.
Yeah. No,
it may be 1,000 years from now, but they will be ready.
Yeah. No, everyone's learning scientific methodology slowly, and it's very different from faith-based thinking, and that's okay. It takes time, and not everybody is completely ready for that at the moment, and that's okay. That's it's probably better that way, because then they come to it on their own understanding, on their own terms, and you can't force that on people. You can't force knowledge on people. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. Well, Daniel, it's been a wonderful conversation, a whole hour and a half. I don't know how we went that long, but I appreciate chatting with you always, man.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Yeah, for me too. So.
All righty. Have a great evening, and we'll chat again soon.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.